Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic for you today. Let's do it. What's the creepiest or strangest thing you've ever witnessed in your own life? Please remember to like, share, comment, hype, listen, and ask for shoutouts, and subscribe.
I used to be an EMT, and we got a call for a multiple car collision. We got on the scene and there were a few injuries among the car drivers, but nothing too serious. Going through each person, I noticed a man kneeling on the ground facing away from me. I ran up and asked if he was hurt, and noticed he was holding his son. Apparently one of the cars hit and killed the kid, while the dad and son were walking. I put my hand on his shoulder. The dad was so grief-stricken he was not breathing, and when he finally took a breath, he screamed like something I've never heard before. That still haunts me. No one should have to see their child die. I was a cashier at a local grocery and I saw an unkempt old man with a scraggly, dirty gray beard. He came to my line, pushing his cart swiftly and avoiding eye contact. From behind, he came 2 or 3 young girls dressed in dirty Amish-looking clothes, like they lived in the prairie. I live in a city with no Amish and no farms nearby. My mind tried to justify it, thinking maybe they were just passing through. I tried to say, "Are you okay?" with my eyes to one of the girls. She just looked at me confused. I kept my eyes on her as she bagged the groceries. They looked uncomfortable, and in my heart, I knew something was wrong. I glared at the guy and watched their every move as they left, trying to find any sign of distress. Our registers were right in front of a large window that looked over the parking lot. The next person in line came through with their groceries, and I couldn't stop looking out into the parking lot. I saw them load their things in a truck and leave. I wanted so badly to see one little sign that would affirm my unease toward the whole thing and prompt me to call the police. It was the most chilling thing I've ever seen, and I felt helpless. I was fairly young and naive. I told my parents about it when I went home, and my dad said I should have called someone. I tried to talk to my coworkers to see if they noticed it and if they had the same feeling I had, but they were all in their own little worlds. All they could do was shrug and say, "There's a lot of weird people in the world." Although I never really forgot about it, I just let it go and tried to shake it off. Well, last year the story came up on the news and I saw a face of that man once again. I nearly cried. I could have saved these girls 4 years earlier. I grew up in a rural western Kentucky from age 8 until I graduated high school. My mom, dad, younger brother, and I lived way out in the woods, essentially for thousands and thousands of acres. It was just us and 3 other families that owned the land. This area was along the Cumberland River. Every year I lived there, a few days before Halloween. The barely paved county road that allows us and other families to get to our homes would become a path for a large caravan of bikers, real bikers, sometimes as many as 40 or 50. They always waved, never met us, and just drove by. For a couple years, we had no idea why they came there. My parents eventually asked the man who once owned all the property in the area who they were. I don't know what he told them, but they told me, I'm around 11 or so at this point, that I was to leave them alone. They were bad people, and referred to them as devil worshippers, and they sacrificed babies. Probably just a gang that got picked up in the woods, but it still scared me. Anyway, one day my dad and I went out for a ride on our 4-wheelers on miles and miles of trails. After an hour or 2, my dad and I stopped so he can have a few beers, alcoholic, and while we are stopped, we can see maybe 500 or 600 yards down in the sort of valley, and we notice where these devil worshippers were camped out. Make a mental note and go on with our day. A few days later, we see the bikes leaving for the year, and Dad and I herd back to their camp. Walking around, we find beer cans and other signs of camp, no biggie. We go to the far end of the camp, and there's a huge fire pit encircled by stones. And about 10 feet in front of that are 4 posts in the ground that look like maybe they held a platform or something. Hear Dad shout, "Shit!" and look over toward the direction of his gaze. Some sort of deer skull was hanging from a tree. Dad says we have to go. On our way back to our ATVs, Dad notices something else around the fire pit ashes. It was a pacifier. Probably just normal bikers and their families hanging out and having fun, but the combo of the skull and pacifier, after being told they were devil worshippers who killed babies, creeped me out for several years. I was out camping at Wilderness State Park in northern Michigan, just west of Mackinac City. It was a group camping thing where my brother and I got together with about 15 of our friends, and we rented out a few lots and pitched our tents right in the middle of this RV park on the campground. The place was adjacent to a national dark sky park, where no white light is permitted in the nighttime, i.e. from flashlights or your cell phone, etc., so that you can look at the stars with as little light pollution as possible. We did bring red bulb flashlights, as they don't emit the same type of light pollution, and we stayed out looking at the stars until about 3 a.m. When we drove back to the campsite, everyone decided to go to sleep except for me, my brother, and 2 of our friends. We wanted to walk from our campsite to the beach, which was just down the road, and maybe keep looking at the stars until dawn. Now, earlier when it was still daylight, I had noticed a path that broke off from the main road and a sign that said auditorium. I'm a naturally curious person who likes to explore my surroundings, so I made a mental note to check it out later. So we start walking toward the beach, and we approach the path. I'm leading the group, so I decide, let's check out the auditorium and see what it's all about. The rest of the group agrees, and we get out of the red flashlights and start walking down the path. I figured it would be a relatively short walk to the auditorium, but it was longer and more winding path than we had anticipated. We suddenly heard a high-pitched squawk that sounded like a bird dying, and at this point we all stopped, unsure of whether we wanted to commit to keep walking this path. My brother was now in the front of the line, so it was his move. He said, "I'm not sure what we should do here," to which I said, "Follow your instinct." My instinct was to turn back now and head back to camp, but he just kept on walking and we followed. So as we got further down the path, we started hearing this low-pitched growling sound coming from our right, which increased in loudness and intensity until we finally reached the clearing where the auditorium was. At this point, the sound got louder, louder, louder. Now it was surrounding us on all sides, and it was absolutely the most terrifying sound I had ever heard in my life. Like a combination of a bear eating away at a carcass, demonic mutterings, and something moving across creaking wood. We shined our red lights onto the auditorium, this old rickety wooden stage that had this cartoonish backdrop curtain all tattered and ripped apart. But what was really unsettling was that in front of the curtain on the stage was a single folding chair facing away from us. I started to get déjà vu, this very striking, this seems familiar, I've been here before feeling, while also getting some serious Blair Witch Project vibes as we ran our red flashlights over the stage. One of our friends who was with us was just absolutely giddy, like the first person who dies in a horror movie. She started laughing really hard and walking toward the stage, and I go, "Nope, we are leaving here right now." And I turned around and nearly sprinted back up the path with the rest of the gang following. The sound followed us out, and we could hear it well until we walked back to the campsite. At this point I said, "I'm going to the beach." The next morning my brother pulled me aside. I hadn't told him about the déjà vu. "I have to ask you something. Did you get this feeling last night, like that had happened to us before?" He wanted to go back and explore, and I said, "You can, but I'm not going back there." That second night at camp, I set off again toward the beach with the same two friends, but not my brother, who decided to call it an early night. I knew we'd have to pass the entrance to the auditorium path again on our way to the beach, and I was nervous. But we all agreed that we would just keep walking without faltering. So, as we approached the path entrance, we heard the same growling again, this time as if it was coming right from the trees to the right of us. We walked straight onward to the beach, and no strangeness followed us this time. When we walked back to the campsite to call it a night, and past the auditorium entrance again, it was absolutely silent, as if something was trying to lure us back in the first time and considered us a lost cause after we ignored it.
Alright guys, quick shout out tonight going out to Tyndall, who is coming back after 10 years. So welcome back from wherever you were. Other than that, an enjoyable short collection of stories tonight. It plays for about 19 minutes or so, if you count me jabbering on right here. But again, hope you guys are doing great, and we will see you tomorrow.
A schizophrenic episode. I witnessed a few while I worked in a psychiatric home for kids, but one I'll never forget was, of course, late at night, and after a really long, shitty day of getting my ass kicked. I had the individual ready for bed and tucked the individual in bed after a short story. We had to stay sitting in the hallway to keep sight and sound on all individuals. The hallway was basically completely dark. I thought that our awful day was behind us and was looking forward to going home in 2 hours. About 5 minutes into thinking this, I hear the individual get out of bed. I can see their silhouette in front of the window of the bedroom. I whisper, "It's time for bed, name." Then I heard a growl and scratching against the window. "Ah, funa." Here we go. I wasn't one to ever ask for help, as sometimes it escalates behavior, so I plan to ignore it. The individual gets back on the bed, and I can see that they're sitting with their legs crossed and looking straight up with their mouth open. Shit. I start kind of freaking out. Some crazy shit is about to happen. It was completely silent, and then the individual started screaming, "They're here!" over and over, the loudest, most ear-piercing scream I've ever heard in my life. My manager comes running to me and I can't move. I'm terrified. We nod at each other and mouth, "Oh." We both look into the bedroom. The individual snaps her head at us and continues screaming this while staring at us with this tormented look. I tell the individual that they are safe and it will be okay. I fucked up apparently, because the individual came charging at me and attacked us both. I will never forget that scream and how demented it sounded. After being completely terrified, my heart broke for this individual. I can't imagine the terror of living with a mental illness like that, the never-ending fear. I worked as a lifeguard last summer at the local pool. Normal things happened, like rescuing people who couldn't swim from the diving well and patching up kids who scraped themselves because they were running on deck. One day, while I was about to get onto the stand at the diving well, and as I was walking, I saw a little boy trying to turn back from the high dive. He'd made it to the edge of the board but got scared and turned back. As he was trying to hurry to get off the board, he slipped and fell. He hit his head right on the edge of the pool and ragdolled into the water. The guard on the stand made the long whistle blow, but since I was closer to the ground, I was the first to get to the kid. Anybody who's a lifeguard will know how difficult it is to backboard somebody for the first time for real. Once we had him on the board and out of the water, the ambulance had arrived and he was transferred onto the stretcher. He came back around. What will be with me forever is how terrified he was. He woke up and screamed, "I don't want to go off. I want off the line," he thought. He was still on the high dive. The paramedics couldn't calm him down, and the way he whimpered and wailed absolutely shook me to the bone. He died later in the evening because of brain hemorrhaging. His parents came to the pool after the funeral to thank the guards for doing what we could. Parents aren't meant to outlive their children, and I understood that when I saw the pain those parents were in. When I was 18, I suffered from anorexia. I had just gotten out of the hospital and was very small and frail looking. My best friend and I decided to celebrate my freedom by going to the movies, and we're going to meet at the theater. I arrived before my friend, so I started walking up to the theater to wait for her. Seemingly out of nowhere, a man comes walking up to me. He was very tall, quite muscular, wearing nice jeans and a wife beater, but most strikingly, he had blood running down his face. He asked me if he could please borrow my phone, saying that he had been injured and needed someone to come pick him up. I immediately agreed, handed him my phone, waited for him to make his call. At the same time, my friend arrived and called out to me. The man finishes his call, nobody answered, thanked me, and was on his way. I don't think anything of it. We started to go in the theater when my friend pointed out that the man was around the corner and watching me. I thought it was weird, but wasn't worried. We bought our tickets, entered the theater, got snacks, and found seats. We're chatting away, waiting for the previews to start, and my friend gets hushed suddenly, and I realize the man has entered the theater. He beelines towards me and asks me to use my phone again. I pass it to him, but I'm starting to feel a little weirded out at this point. He makes a big deal of trying to find service, then asks if he can use my phone outside since he can't get any bars. I protest, but he's insistent on it, so I tell him sure, go ahead. He asks me to come with him, and I agree, and I follow him out. At this point, all movies are in session. There's no one working in the box office, and this theater is kind of out in the boonies. There's no one around but this man and me. He dials while walking away, looking back to make sure I'm following. He begins walking around the corner slowly, making sure I'm following and that nobody is following me. At this point, the manager of the theater comes outside and yells at the man to get back. The man sees the manager, also a large young guy, and frickin' books it, running as fast as he can around the corner, throwing my phone in the bushes as he goes. I'm shaken and a little confused. The manager is on the phone with the police, who show up shortly. They grab my phone from the bushes and show me that this man never attempted to actually make any calls. They feel that the whole thing was an effort to get me around the corner alone, where a car was waiting to snatch me. They took it very seriously, even releasing the surveillance videos that showed the man lurking, luring me and ultimately him running around the corner and jumping into a car that was waiting. They never found the guy. Luckily, I wasn't harmed, and I even got my phone back, but I always wonder what his true intentions were and how I ultimately could have ended up.